Gillian Robertson versus Miranda Maverick. We got plus 120 on the Canadian Gillian Robertson and minus 140 on Fear the Maverick, Miranda Maverick. We'll start off with the Gillian Robertson side of things, where she's coming off a decision loss to Tyler Santos, who just clearly showed she was the stronger woman, and she was able to stay out of the submissions of Gillian Robertson. And I feel really bad for Gillian because there were some very near submission attempts where she was throwing up arm bars, throwing up triangles, but it seemed like she was just in a bad position, like being up against the cage and not really able to fully extend. And then also, getting these near submissions near the ending of the round and not really getting the extra maybe 15, 20, or 30 seconds that she needed to complete those. She's coming off before that. She was coming off of 2 wins over Courtney Casey and Poliana Botelho, submitting one and going to a decision with the other. And those were 2 fights where I actually took the under 2.5 as well. And more often than not, these Gillian Robertson under 2.5s are the spots that I like to look at. And this fight is no different. And the Casey one, it came a little bit too late. I think it was a minute and a half too late where she ended up locking up the submission. And then the Poliana Botelho fight, that was a fight where we saw Gillian Robertson with the top control for the majority of that fight, but we just didn't see Poliana do anything to try to get back to her feet. Or it might have been the other way around, but regardless, we just didn't see the urgency from Botelho in terms of trying to get back to the feet, which, usually opens up the submission paths for Gillian Robertson. So Gillian just pretty much won that fight off of control. We saw her get pretty much laced up by Macy Barber. She wasn't successful in getting that fight to the ground long enough to pull off a submission. And we know the striking game of Robertson is very, very much lacking. And then obviously the fight before that, she mounted Sarah Froto and got a beautiful KO via ground and pound there. That's pretty much Gillian Robertson's game, though. She's diving for takedown. She's going for the single leg, and I think that's pretty much what her game is based around. And it's very easy to prepare for a woman like Gillian Robertson. Just work that takedown defense as much as possible, and then obviously work the jiu-jitsu as much as possible to stay out of that funky and powerful and offensive style of Gillian Robertson when it comes to the grappling realm. She really needs to work on her hands, though, as I feel that if she works on her hands more, she can kind of start to trick her opponents into thinking, okay, maybe she's going to want to be a striker for this round or something like that. And that's where she's able to open up the takedown opportunities for herself. But she's just fighting so often that it doesn't seem like she's truly evolving the rest of her game. Like, it's just always, I'm going to go in there with the same game plan, which is try to take you down or pull guard or whatever it is, get this into the grappling realm and try to pull off a submission. I wonder how long that's going to work for her, though. You know what I mean? Like, she's 3-2 in her last 5 fights. Okay, that's cool. But if she's just not able to evolve, like, how is she going to continue to beat other women in this division? Like, this is a 125-pound division. You're going up against Valentina Shevchenko if you find yourself at the top of this division. You really think Shevchenko is going to succumb to a style like that? Probably not. It does lead to very entertaining fights, as Robertson normally, goes out there and gets the win, or goes out there and goes out on her shield. And, in that fight against Tyler Santos, she was just absolutely outmuscled and just couldn't pull off any type of submission in that fight. Her striking is pretty much just laid down to, I'm going to flash a couple strikes out there, try to feint a couple times, change levels on you a couple times. But at the end of the day, the thing that I'm going to put 100% into is that takedown, and then eventually the offensive jiu-jitsu, which is her game. Now, on the other side, you got Miranda Maverick, who's 23 years old. I believe she's studying for her PhD or her master's or something like that. So she's a part-time student, part-time fighter. But when you see her every single time out, she's making improvements. And I think that's very key here, as she's still very young. And even though some people might bank on the fact that, okay, she's a student, so she might not be as focused on the fighting game, but the fighting game allows her to pay for her studies, which is why she's so focused on the fighting aspect of it as well too. So it's pretty much based on what you perceive their perspective to be. And you can listen to fighter interviews and say, okay, this is what she thinks, but like, you always have to take these fighter interviews with a grain of salt for sure. So Miranda Maverick, she's coming on a 4-fight winning streak right now. That's not including her Phoenix Series fights that she had with Invicta. Obviously, those are just exhibition fights. They do these one-night tournaments where these fights don't officially count until you fight your final fight. So I'm not even taking those fights into consideration. But her last fight, she did win via doctor stoppage against Liana Jojo, where she landed a beautiful step in elbow, upward elbow, I believe it was, landed right on the nose of Liana and just busted her upper immediately. Just that cut just would not stop bleeding. Now, could that fight have gone on longer? Yeah. Even Liana Jojua herself wanted to be like, hey, I can still fight. It's just a cut. You know, I mean, we've seen much worse cuts and much, in much worse spots, and the referee still allows them to fight. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if it had anything to do with the fact that, as a woman, and I, hate to be sexist or anything like that, but I feel as though they do cater a little bit more towards the women in terms of the amount of damage that they're taking. Regardless, beautiful performance from Miranda Maverick on the feet. She showed great and improved Muay Thai. Her striking just looked on point. Her step and elbows were beautiful. And then in the fight before that, it was her Invicta fight against Pearl Gonzalez, where she came in as a very slight underdog, but still went out there and did some good work. You know what I mean? She was able to keep up with the transitions from Pro Gonzalez, do some good work from on top, land some good damage from on top, have some solid success with the striking as well too. But I think this is a girl that we're going to see an evolution from every single time out. Now, I'm not the most, keen on going out there and betting her at that minus 140 range, but I do think this is a fight where she could outpower Gillian Robertson. I think Robertson will obviously have the jiu-jitsu advantage here, that's without a doubt, and I do think that she would be successful in getting Miranda Maverick down, but then it comes into the parts where, like, how much does the strength play into it, and how much does the improvements of Miranda Maverick change the trajectory of this fight? Now, the parts that I see where we'll see Maverick have success is obviously the striking. So if she's able to keep it there, that's where she'll have the most amount of success. But I do think she is live for a finish. I think both women are live for a finish here. That's why I'm probably going to go back to the well of betting a Gillian Robertson under here. We got plus 150, which is a solid enough line for me to take the shot, considering that both women are very live for a finish, whether it's a submission on either side or even a ground and pound from the Miranda Maverick side. Or if this fight stays on the feet long enough that Miranda Maverick is able to get her paws on her, land some good strikes, land some good kicks, land some good elbows, and eventually just put away Gillian Robertson on the feet. So I'll side with Miranda Maverick, and I'll side with the under 2.5, which I think is very, very live. But I think that Maverick's strength is going to be a little bit too much for Robertson, and she might be able to catch her in these bad positions and just start unloading on her with some ground and pound. And I think that's a very, very live spot here as well too. So I'll go with Maverick. I'll go with KO or ground and pound. I don't know whether round 1 or round 2, but just for the sake of it, let's try to keep the trend of round 2 women's finishes that I'm calling. So I would say round 2, Miranda Maverick wins this fight either by ground and pound or just striking on the feet. So once again, I'll go with Miranda Maverick via KO, ground and pound, whatever you want to call it.